When I lost my mother, my Emile showed up to the wake in white and said, "Well, one less voice in the way now, right?" I stood there, numb, while my husband took her home and said, "She didn't mean it like that." I swallowed my grief, buried my rage. On her 70th birthday, she got a gift in the mail, a blank card, no return address. Inside, just a slip of paper that said, "You're lucky I was raised right." I grew up just outside Columbus, Ohio, in a quiet place where everybody knew everybody. My mom was my rock. She wasn't perfect, but she was strong and steady in ways that mattered. She showed up for me every time life knocked me down. When she died, it felt like I was suddenly alone on a boat in the middle of a dark, cold ocean.
No anchor.
No map. She was 67 when she passed. A massive heart attack. No warning. One day, we were laughing about some dumb show on TV. The next, she was gone. The wake was held at a small church that smelled like old wood and lemon polish. I stood at the front, greeting people with a fake smile. Every handshake, every hug made me feel like I was getting scraped with sandpaper. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I stayed standing, because that's what my mom would have wanted. Dean, my husband of 6 years, stood next to me. He tried. He really did. But Dean wasn't built for heavy emotions. He grew up stuffing feelings down until they turned into ulcers or bad decisions. I was grateful he was there, even though he barely said a word. I should have known better than to think that day couldn't get worse. Marlene showed up. Dean's mother. My mother-in-law. Marlene was a woman who believed the whole world was a competition she had to win. Every conversation was a chance to one-up you. Every family event was a chance to show off. She didn't love Dean the way a mother should love her son. She treated him like an extension of herself, a trophy she needed to polish. She walked in wearing bright, blinding white pantsuit, white heels, white purse. Her jewelry clinked and clattered as she moved down the aisle like she was modeling for a catalog, not attending a wake. I heard gasps from people around me, but Marlene didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. She made a beeline for Dean first, hugging him tightly, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Then she turned to me, gave me the fakest one-armed hug imaginable, and leaned in close. She smelled like roses and hairspray. And then, with a little smirk, she said, "Well, one less voice in the way now, right?" For a second, I didn't understand. My brain was stuck on a loop, replaying her words over and over, trying to make them make sense. One less voice. In the way. In the way of what? And then it hit me. She meant my mother. She meant my mother, who sometimes called out Marlene's manipulations. She meant my mother, who never kissed her ass. Marlene saw my mom's death as a win. My hands started to shake. My stomach turned over. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but Dean grabbed Marlene's elbow and said quickly, "Come on, Mom," and steered her away. I stood there, frozen.
Numb.
I should have screamed. I should have slapped her across her smug, powdered face. But all I did was stand there. Dean came back about 20 minutes later, looking sheepish. "She didn't mean it like that," he mumbled. And like a fool, like a tired, broken fool, I swallowed it. I buried my rage deep down under the grief that was already crushing me. I smiled through the rest of the wake. I shook hands. I accepted hugs. And when I got home, I cried until my ribs hurt. The long year after I tried to move on, I threw myself into work. I kept my head down. Dean and I drifted apart in little, silent ways. He still visited Marlene, still called her every week. I couldn't even say her name without feeling sick.
I didn't tell anyone what she said to me that day.
Not my friends, not my siblings. It felt like this dirty, shameful secret I had to carry alone. But I didn't forget. Every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every family gathering, her words were there, buzzing under my skin like a swarm of bees. Her 70th birthday, Marlene's 70th birthday, was a huge deal in the family. They rented out a fancy Italian restaurant in downtown Columbus. Invited everyone she'd ever known. Dean begged me to go. I said no. I said I wasn't feeling well. I said work was crazy. I said anything but the truth, that I would rather set myself on fire than sit across from that woman and pretend everything was fine. Dean went without me. But I didn't just stay home and stew.
I sent her a little something.
A plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a plain white card. No words. No design. Just a single slip of paper that said, "You're lucky I was raised right." That's it. Nothing more. Nothing less. I heard through the grapevine that she opened it at the party. Big smile on her face, expecting something expensive, no doubt. When she pulled out that little slip of paper, her face changed. Dean said she went white as a sheet. She tucked the card into her purse and pretended nothing happened. But everyone noticed she was off the rest of the night. She stopped mentioning me after that. Stopped calling me. Stopped making passive-aggressive comments when Dean talked to her on speakerphone. I had reminded her, quietly but firmly, that not everyone she wronged was going to roll over and forget it. Some of us remember.
Some of us bide our time.
The aftermath after the birthday party, things between Dean and me got colder. Not loud. Not explosive. Just cold.
He didn't ask about the card.
I didn't volunteer anything. But I knew he suspected. And deep down, I think he knew why. He started working later. Spending more weekends with his brother. We became polite strangers passing each other in the kitchen. One night, a month after Marlene's party, Dean came home drunk. Not sloppy drunk. Just the kind of drunk that makes a man reckless with his words. He stood in the doorway, swaying a little, and said, "You embarrassed her." I was washing dishes. I kept my back turned. He said it again, louder. "You embarrassed her." I set the plate down slowly. Turned off the water. I turned around and looked at him. Really looked. This man who was supposed to be my partner. This man who had watched me crumble at my mother's wake. This man who had let his mother spit on my grief. And he was angry at me. I said, quietly, "She humiliated me the day my mother died." Dean opened his mouth. Closed it. Then, after a long, heavy pause, he said, "It wasn't that serious." Something inside me broke. Not cracked. Snapped. The line gets drawn after that night. I stopped pretending. I didn't go to family events. I didn't send birthday cards. I didn't call or text anyone on his side of the family. I made it clear. If Marlene was involved, I wasn't. Dean hated it. He said I was making him choose. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just said, "Make your choice then." For months, we lived like that.
Silent.
Angry. Distant. Then one morning, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. A dinner for two. A nice steakhouse downtown. A place way fancier than he ever took me. At first, I told myself he probably went with his brother. Maybe a coworker. But the part that made my stomach sink, there were 2 desserts on the receipt. 2 glasses of wine. His brother didn't drink wine. His brother didn't even like dessert. The twist, I sat with that knowledge for 2 days. Didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until Dean got home from work, calm as could be. I held up the receipt and said, "So, who's she?" He tried to lie. Tried to spin some garbage about a client dinner. I just stared at him. No yelling. No tears. Just staring. Finally, he cracked. He admitted it. There was someone else.
Not serious, he said.
Just a mistake. Just a moment of weakness. I laughed. Actually laughed. Right in his face. I said, "You chose her the day my mother died. Don't pretend this is new." And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to finish this. But not loud. Not messy.
Quiet. Precise. Permanent.
The setup after Dean confessed, I didn't say much. I didn't cry. I didn't ask who she was. He must have thought that meant it was over, that we'd fight, maybe cry a little, then pretend nothing happened. Because that's what he did with problems.
But me?
I don't forget. And I sure as hell don't forgive when it's not deserved. First thing I did was call my friend Cassie. Cassie worked at a small but tough divorce law firm in Columbus. We hadn't talked much since my mom died, mostly because I'd cut myself off from everyone, but when I called her that day, she answered on the second ring. "Cassie," I said, "I need the meanest lawyer you've got." She didn't even ask why. She just said, "Come in tomorrow." The play over the next few weeks, I gathered everything I could. Every receipt, every suspicious bank charge, every weird work trip that didn't make sense. Cassie's people were good. Real good. They found out Dean had been seeing Marlene's neighbor's daughter. A pretty little thing fresh out of college, 24 years old, working part-time at a yoga studio. Her name was Brianna. Brianna, who had no idea Dean was married. At least at first. Apparently, Marlene had introduced them at some church fundraiser months ago. Because of course she did. Because it wasn't enough for Marlene to insult my dead mother. She had to help Dean replace me too. The twist inside the twist, I could have just filed for divorce quietly. I could have taken my share and disappeared. But something inside me, something hard, wanted more. So I started planning. First step, I played nice. Real nice. I acted like nothing was wrong. I made Dean dinner. I asked about his day. I even pretended to be interested when he droned on about work. He thought he was off the hook. While he smiled and joked, I was packing up my important things, my grandmother's jewelry, my birth certificate, my savings account info. Anything I cared about, I moved out little by little. He didn't notice. Too busy texting Brianna, I guess. Second step, I got copies of everything. The mortgage, the car title, our joint accounts. Turns out, my name wasn't just on the house. I was the primary holder. Because I had better credit when we bought it. Which meant if I wanted to, I could force the sale. And guess what? Dean didn't have the money to buy me out. Not even close. Not after all those fancy dinners and weekend trips. Then came the final move. I waited until the night of Marlene's big church award dinner. She was getting some plaque for service to the community. Of course she was. Dean and Marlene both begged me to come. Put on the full guilt show. It would mean so much to the family. It's a chance to start fresh. We should all move past things. I smiled and agreed. I even bought a new dress. Dark blue. Elegant. Classy. Marlene wore white again. Some stupid fancy gown that made her look like she was trying to be 30 years younger. The reveal halfway through dinner, while everyone was smiling and clapping for Marlene's stupid award, I slipped away. Went out to my car. Opened my laptop. Sent an email. To everyone. The entire guest list. Family, friends, Marlene's church group. Even Dean's coworkers. Attached were screenshots. Of Dean's affair. Of Marlene's texts arranging dates behind my back. I even threw in a few financial documents showing Dean had borrowed money from our accounts to pay for weekends with Brianna. Subject line was simple. Since we're all celebrating honesty and service tonight. By the time I walked back into the banquet hall, it was chaos. Phones buzzing. People whispering. Marlene staring at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. Dean looked up and saw me. I smiled. A real smile. Then I turned and walked out. Got into my car. Drove away, without looking back. The fallout by the time I got home that night, my phone was blowing up. First it was Dean. Call after call after call. Then texts. What the hell did you do? You ruined everything. You're crazy. I didn't answer. I just sat on the couch, took off my heels, and opened a bottle of wine. Then came the calls from Marlene. I didn't answer those either. Dean finally shows up around midnight. Dean finally banged on the front door. I didn't move. He kept banging, louder and louder, shouting my name. Finally, I stood up, walked to the door, opened it just a crack. Dean was standing there, red-faced, eyes wild. You humiliated us, he yelled. You made us look like trash in front of everyone. I looked him dead in the eye and said, real quiet, you did that all by yourself. He shoved his way inside, pacing like a caged animal. You could have just talked to me, he shouted. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A short, sharp laugh. Talk, I said. Like you talked to Brianna? His face twisted. He tried to say something, but nothing came out. I kept my voice calm. The papers are coming, Dean. You'll be served by the end of the week. He froze. I'm not signing anything, he said. I shrugged. You won't have to, I said. You're already screwed. The legal hammer falls 3 days later. Dean got served at work. In front of his boss. In front of half the office. Cassie made sure the papers were airtight. Adultery listed in the complaint. Request for sale of the house. Full accounting of missing joint funds. Dean tried to fight it at first. Filed some half-assed response trying to paint me as unstable. Cassie shredded him. When we went to mediation, he showed up looking like hell. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, eyes bloodshot. Marlene came too. Sat behind him, glaring at me like I had personally burned down her house. I didn't even look at her. I just told the mediator calmly, I'm not asking for anything more than what's mine. Dean had no choice. He couldn't afford a drawn-out court battle. Not with all the evidence we had. Not with his reputation already circling the drain at work. In the end, I got half the proceeds from the house, half his retirement account, full ownership of my car. No alimony because I didn't want a damn thing from him longer than necessary. He walked away with a tiny apartment, a ruined name, and Marlene whispering poison in his ear. Marlene's life starts cracking too after the email blast. Marlene standing at church dropped fast. Whispers followed her everywhere. People who once sucked up to her started keeping their distance. Turns out, a lot of folks didn't like her as much as she thought. They were just polite. And when they saw what she really was underneath that fake smile, they dropped her like a bad habit. She lost her spot on the church council, was quietly uninvited from a few charity events. Her name wasn't gold anymore. It was mud. Dean tries to crawl back. About 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Dean showed up at my door again. He looked rough, skinnier, tired. Said Brianna had dumped him. Apparently, she wasn't too keen on sticking around once the money ran dry. Said Marlene was making his life miserable.
Said he missed me.
I let him talk. Let him pour out all his little sad words. And when he was done, I just smiled, that same cold, real smile, and said, You're lucky I was raised right. Then I shut the door in his face. The ending after I shut the door in Dean's face, I stood there for a second, just listening.
No yelling. No begging.
Just silence. Then I heard his footsteps, heavy and slow, dragging down the porch steps. It was done. The new life the house sold fast. I walked away with a good chunk of money. Not enough to make me rich, but enough to start over, without chains on my ankles. I moved 2 towns over. Found a small rental house with a backyard and a sunroom. Started working freelance, making my own hours, answering to nobody. It wasn't easy. Grief still sat on my chest some mornings, heavier than the heaviest blanket. The hurt from my mom's death didn't magically disappear. Neither did the betrayal from Dean. But little by little, I started breathing again. Dean's downfall. Dean lost his job about 4 months after the divorce. Too much drama, too many whispers. When his boss let him go, Dean didn't even try to fight it. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a warehouse. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment across town. Still trying to patch things up with Marlene, who had turned on him the second he wasn't useful anymore. She blamed him for everything now. Told anyone who would listen that he ruined the family name. The woman who once used him like a pawn now kicked him like a stray dog. Good. Marlene's payback. Marlene kept trying to claw her way back into respectability. She donated more money to the church, held more events at her house, tried harder and harder to scrub the stain off her reputation. But it didn't work. People smiled to her face, sure. But behind closed doors, they laughed. They told the story of how she showed up to a woman's funeral wearing white. They gossiped about the perfect mother who helped her son cheat on his wife. The whispers never stopped. Her world shrank. First, the church stopped inviting her. Then the charity boards dropped her. Even her old friends stopped answering her calls. She was left alone with her bitterness and her fake smile. Exactly where she belonged. My mistake. I won't pretend I walked away spotless. Holding on to anger the way I did, it changed me, made me colder, harder. There are days I wish I had screamed at Marlene at the wake. Days I wish I had thrown my drink in Dean's face instead of sitting there, swallowing it all down like poison. Maybe if I had stood up for myself sooner, it wouldn't have eaten me alive for so long. But I also know this. When the time came, I didn't stay silent. I made them face what they did. I made them see they weren't untouchable. And I walked away free. Final words: if there's anything I learned from all of this, it's that revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be messy. Sometimes the best revenge is living well and letting them rot in the ruins they built with their own damn hands.